The bank staff mocked him until his account balance turned their faces pale. Welcome to True Soul Narratives, where every story carries a heartbeat, love, betrayal, forgiveness, and the courage to start again. If this story resonates with you, subscribe and leave a like. Now let's return to the story. Marcus stood at the polished marble counter of Prestige Financial, paint still drying on his jeans, dust from the construction site coating his boots. Three tellers huddled together behind the counter, their laughter barely concealed behind manicured hands. He'd asked a simple question. He wanted to open an investment account, and they were laughing at him. The youngest teller, Ashley, stepped forward with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Sir, maybe you should try a bank more suited to your situation." She glanced at his clothes, her meaning crystal clear. Marcus took a breath, centering himself. He'd been here before. Different room, same judgment. "I assure you I can meet your requirements." The manager appeared then, summoned by Ashley's pointed look. Mr. Peterson took one glance at Marcus, at his work-stained clothes and his black skin, and his expression hardened with assumption. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "I'm a customer," Marcus said quietly, "trying to open an account." "Security," Peterson called, not taking his eyes off Marcus. Marcus's jaw tightened, but his voice remained steady. "I'd like to speak with the branch director." "Now." Ashley smirked, exchanging another look with her coworker. "She's not going to waste her time." The office door opened. Karen Chen, the branch director, stepped out, drawn by the commotion. Her eyes landed on Marcus, and every drop of color drained from her face. "Mr. Cole?" 2 hours ago, Marcus Cole was just another construction worker they judged by his appearance. What they didn't know was that the man in paint-stained jeans had just sold his tech startup for $47 million. And he was about to teach him a lesson about respect they'd never forget. But to understand how a millionaire ended up being mocked in a bank, you need to know where his journey started. Marcus Cole was 38 years old, and he'd been underestimated his entire life. He grew up on the South Side, in a neighborhood where opportunity was something you saw on television, not something you lived. His mother, Diana, worked 3 jobs to keep a roof over their heads. Overnight shift at the hospital, mornings cleaning offices, afternoons at a laundromat. Marcus barely saw her, but when he did, she always said the same thing. "Baby, judge people by their character, not their appearance. And don't you ever let anyone judge you by anything less." Marcus was brilliant with computers, self-taught, staying up nights in the library learning code from borrowed books and free online tutorials. While other kids his age were out living their lives, Marcus was teaching himself programming languages, building small applications, dreaming of something bigger. But dreams didn't pay bills. So during the day, Marcus worked construction, hard physical labor that left his hands calloused and his body aching. But at night, in his tiny studio apartment, he coded. 3 years, every single night, building an app he knew could revolutionize the logistics industry, streamline supply chains, save companies millions. He pitched it to investors 47 times, 47 rejections. "You don't look like a tech founder," one venture capitalist had said, barely glancing at his presentation. "Maybe you should stick to construction," another suggested, the racism barely coded. "Do you even have a degree?" they'd ask, dismissing him before he finished explaining. Every rejection stung, every judgment based on his skin color, his neighborhood, his lack of pedigree, cut deeper. But Marcus never gave up, because his mother's words echoed in his mind every time someone looked at him and saw less than he was. "Your worth isn't determined by how others see you." Then he met Eleanor Hayes, an older white woman, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, who'd made her fortune in real estate and was looking for her next investment. She listened to his pitch, actually listened, didn't look at his clothes or his background, but at his product, his vision, his numbers. "This is brilliant," she'd said simply. "I'm in." With Eleanor's investment, LogiTrack Solutions launched. Within 2 years, it was the fastest-growing logistics app in North America. Fortune 500 companies were clients. The industry had transformed. And that morning at 9:34 a.m., Marcus had sat in a lawyer's office and signing the papers selling his company for $47 million. He'd come straight from his construction mom, hadn't had time to go home and change, hadn't had time to process that he was now a millionaire. He just signed the papers in his paint-stained jeans and dusty work boots, his hands still rough from laying at bricks that morning. The lawyer, a man in an expensive suit who'd made more on this deal than most people made in a decade, had smiled at Marcus. "You're a millionaire now, Mr. Cole. First thing people usually do is celebrate. Pop some champagne, buy something ridiculous." Marcus had shaken his head. "First thing I'm doing is taking care of my mother. She's worked 3 jobs my entire life. Time for her to rest." So he'd driven straight to Prestige Financial, the most reputable bank in the city, to open an investment account that would secure his mother's retirement, secure her future so she'd never have to work another overnight shift, never have to choose between paying rent and buying her groceries, never have to sacrifice one more thing for him. He walked into the gleaming lobby still wearing his work clothes, aware of how he looked among the suited business people conducting their transactions. But he'd earned his place here, earned it through 3 years of sleepless nights, 47 rejections, and the kind of determination that only comes from growing up with nothing and building everything yourself. He approached the counter, polite and respectful, and asked to open an investment account. That's when the judgment began. Ashley, the young teller with perfect blonde hair and a smile dripping with condescension, looked him up and down like he'd tracked mud into a palace. "Can I help you?" The tone said she'd rather do anything but help him. "I'd like to open an investment account," Marcus said. Ashley exchanged a glance with her coworker, Brad, a guy in his late 20s with slicked back hair and a smirk that said he was in on the joke. They both suppressed laughter. "Sir," Ashley said, her voice syrupy with fake patience, "our investment accounts require a minimum balance of $100,000. The implication was clear. "You can't afford this. You don't belong here." Marcus kept his voice level. "That won't be a problem." Ashley's smile tightened. She clearly didn't believe him. Didn't believe a black man in construction clothes could have that kind of money. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable at a different bank. One more hiring, accessible to your demographic." The words hung in the air between them. Coded racism, barely disguised. Your demographic. Marcus had heard variations of this his entire life, had felt the sting of it in boardrooms, at pitch meetings, in spaces where his presence was questioned before his credentials ever were. Other customers were watching now, some with sympathy, others with judgment. The assumption was the same. He didn't belong. Marcus felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders, the exhaustion of constantly having to prove his worth, defend his presence, justify his existence in spaces where people who looked like him weren't expected to be. But he also felt something else, his mother's voice, his own hard-won success, and a quiet, powerful resolve. He wasn't leaving, not this time. If this story already has your blood pumping, subscribe to True Soul Narratives, because what happens next will restore your faith that dignity always wins. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before people knew your story? Tell us in the comments. Marcus took a slow breath, steadying himself against the wave of familiar humiliation. "I assure you I can meet your requirements," he repeated, his voice calm despite the anger building in his chest. Brad, the other teller, leaned against the counter with a smirk that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "Dude, investment accounts aren't for people like you. No offense, but these people like you." The words landed like they always did, heavy, cutting, designed to remind Marcus that no matter what he achieved, some people would always see his skin before they saw him. Other customers were staring now. An older woman in pearls looked at Marcus with pity. A businessman in a suit shook his head, judgment written all over his face. A young couple whispered to each other, phones half raised like they were deciding whether this was worth recording. Marcus felt the sting of every stare, every assumption, every silent verdict being passed on him. But he'd spent 38 years navigating this. He knew how to stand firm even when everything in him wanted to walk away. "I'd like to speak with someone who can actually help me," Marcus said, his voice steady. Ashley's face flushed with irritation. She turned and called across the bank floor, her voice deliberately loud. "Mr. Peterson, we have a situation here." The branch manager appeared from his office, a man in his 50s with thinning hair and a permanent expression of suspicion. Mr. Peterson approached the counter, took one look at Marcus, at his paint-stained jeans and his black skin, and his face hardened. "Sir," Peterson said, his tone leaving no room for discussion, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Marcus met his eyes. "I'm a customer trying to open an account." "I don't know what you're trying to pull," Peterson said, stepping closer, lowering his voice like he was dealing with someone unstable. "But this is a respectable establishment. We don't tolerate—" "I'm not trying to pull anything," Marcus interrupted, his composure cracking slightly. "I have funds to deposit, significant funds, and I'm being treated like a criminal for walking through your door." Peterson's expression didn't change. "Look, I don't want to call security, but if you're causing a disturbance," there it was, the threat, the assumption that Marcus was the problem, not the staff who'd mocked him from the moment he opened his mouth. Peterson looked at Marcus and saw homeless, confused, possibly dangerous. Every stereotype, every prejudice, wrapped up in one quick judgment. Other staff members were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. They huddled near the desks, whispering behind hands, shooting glances at Marcus like he was a spectacle, like he was something to be dealt with and removed. Marcus felt the weight of every assumption pressing down on him. He'd felt this weight in boardrooms when investors dismissed his pitch before he finished his first sentence. He'd felt it in coffee shops when people clutched their bags tighter as he passed. He'd felt it every single day of his life in a country that taught people to fear him before knowing him. But he also remembered his mother's words about dignity, about worth, about refusing to let other people's prejudice define who you are. He took a deep breath, centering himself in the truth of who he was, not what they assumed. "I'd like to speak with the branch director," Marcus said clearly. "Now." Ashley laughed, actually laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "Ms. Chen is very busy. She doesn't have time for—" "For what?" Marcus interrupted, his voice cutting through her mockery. "For customers? Or just for customers who look like me?" The room went silent. The accusation hung in the air, impossible to ignore. Every person in that bank knew exactly what Marcus was saying, and most of them knew he was right. Peterson's face turned red, anger and embarrassment warring on his features. "That's it. I'm calling security." "Please do," Marcus said, standing his ground. "But also get Ms. Chen. I'll wait." 2 minutes later, a security guard arrived. He was a young black man, maybe 25, with kind eyes and a uniform that looked too big on his slim frame. Deshaun, his name tag read. The moment he walked in and saw Marcus standing at the counter surrounded by hostile staff and staring customers, recognition flickered across his face. He'd been here. Maybe not in this exact situation, but close enough. He knew what this was. Deshaun approached Marcus slowly, his voice low and gentle. "Brother, maybe just go. It's not worth it." Marcus looked at him, saw the concern, the understanding, the shared experience of being black in spaces that didn't want you. "It's always worth it," Marcus said quietly. "I'm tired of being invisible. Tired of being judged before I even open my mouth. Tired of pretending that's okay." "I get it, man, I do," Deshaun said. "But they're not going to listen. They never do." "Maybe," Marcus said. "But I'm done walking away." Other customers were definitely filming now, phones held up, capturing everything. Ashley and Brad were huddled together, their earlier confidence shaken but still present. Ashley's voice carried across the marble floors. "I can't believe he's still here. Does he not get it?" Brad's response was quieter, but Marcus heard it anyway. "Some people just don't know their place." The words hit like physical blows, every syllable a reminder of how they saw him. Not as a customer, not as a person, as someone who needed to be put in his place, as someone who'd crossed a line by daring to exist in their space. Marcus felt every cut, absorbed every insult, but he didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't give them the satisfaction of seeing him break. The office door at the back of the bank opened. A woman stepped out, drawn by the commotion that had overtaken her branch. Karen Chen, 45, elegant in a charcoal suit, her dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, moved with the confidence of someone who'd earned her position through decades of hard work. She approached with professional concern, ready to handle whatever situation her staff couldn't manage. Peterson immediately started talking, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to explain. Ms. Chen, I'm so sorry to disturb you, but this man is refusing to leave. Karen's eyes swept past Peterson, past the gathered staff, past the filming customers, and landed on Marcus. For one frozen moment, she just stared. Then recognition crashed over her like a wave. Marcus watched the color drain from her face, watched her eyes go wide, watched her hand fly to her mouth in shock. Mr. Cole? Karen whispered, her voice barely audible over the murmurs of the crowd. And in that moment, everything changed. 5 years ago, Karen Chen had been a junior associate at Sterling Venture Capital, working under a man who'd built his fortune on aggressive deals and even more aggressive prejudices. She'd been in the conference room that day when Marcus walked in to pitch his logistics app, wearing the same kind of work clothes he wore now, carrying a laptop held together with duct tape and a dream he'd coded in a tiny apartment. Her boss, Richard Sterling, had barely let Marcus get through 3 slides before cutting him off. Let me save us both some time. You don't have the background, the education, or frankly, the profile we look for in founders. Maybe stick to what you're good at. The racist subtext wasn't even subtle. Karen had sat there furious and ashamed, watching Marcus gather his materials with dignity, even as every person in that room dismissed him. But after the meeting, she'd followed him to the elevator, pulled him aside, and said the words that had stayed with Marcus through 46 more rejections. Don't give up. You have something special. This idea is brilliant, and one day someone's going to see that. She'd given him her card, told him to stay in touch, and Marcus had. Over the years, he'd emailed her updates, small victories, new features, growing user numbers, and Karen had responded to every single one, encouraging him, believing in him when the rest of the world said no. She'd left Sterling Venture Capital a year later, disgusted by the culture, by the men like her boss who let prejudice guide their decisions. She'd taken the director position at Prestige Financial to build something different, something better. She'd never forgotten Marcus Cole, never stopped believing in him, and now he stood in her bank, humiliated by her staff, and she felt the shame of it burning through her. This is Marcus Cole, Karen said, her voice cutting through the silence, addressing the entire bank. Founder and former CEO of Logitrack Solutions. Confused faces, Ashley and Brad exchanged glances, clearly not recognizing the name. Peterson frowned, trying to place it. The company, Karen continued, her voice sharp and clear, that was acquired this morning for $47 million. The words hit like a physical force. Ashley's smirk vanished completely, her face going pale. Brad's cocky posture crumbled, his shoulders sagging as the reality crashed over him. Peterson's face transformed from red with anger to white with horror, the implications sinking in with devastating clarity. And he came to our bank, Karen said, her voice cold with fury, to open an account, to trust us with his business, to trust us with his family's future. She paused, letting the silence stretch. How did you treat him? No one spoke. No one could. The shame was too thick, too complete. Marcus stood quietly, watching them realize, watching the moment their assumptions shattered against the truth, watching them understand that they judged a millionaire by his clothes and his skin color, and revealed exactly who they were in the process. Karen turned to Marcus, and her professional mask cracked, revealing genuine anguish. I'm so sorry, Marcus. This is completely unacceptable. Marcus's voice was tired but steady. It's not the first time, won't be the next. But it should be, Karen said fiercely. In my bank it will be. She turned to her staff, her expression hardening. Ashley, Brad, my office. Now. They moved like people in a nightmare, stumbling toward the office. Karen's gaze swept to Peterson. You too. They filed past Marcus, unable to meet his eyes, the weight of their judgment now crushing them. The customers who'd been filming were applauding now, the sound echoing through the marble lobby. Several approached Marcus, apologizing, telling him he'd done the right thing by staying. Deshaun, the security guard, stepped forward, his eyes red. Man, I'm sorry, I should have stood up for you, should have said something. Marcus looked at him with understanding. You were put in an impossible position. I know what that's like. You don't owe me an apology. Deshaun nodded, gratitude and respect clear on his face. You're a better man than I would have been. 15 minutes later, Karen emerged from her office alone. Marcus was sitting in the lobby, exhausted from the confrontation, but still standing in his truth. They've been terminated, Karen said quietly. Effective immediately. Marcus looked up surprised. All three of them? I won't have people on my team who judge customers by their appearance, their race, or any other factor that has nothing to do with their character. Karen's voice was firm. They had a choice in how they treated you. They made it. That seems harsh, Marcus said, though he felt no real sympathy for them. Maybe training, some lessons need consequences. They didn't just make a mistake, Marcus. They humiliated you. They revealed who they are at their core. And I won't let people like that represent my bank. She gestured toward the private offices in the back. Please let me help you open your accounts, in privacy, with the respect you should have received from the beginning. Marcus stood, his body aching from the tension he had been holding. I'm honored you chose our bank, Karen added, despite everything that just happened. Marcus managed a small smile. I chose it because I knew you worked here. Because 5 years ago, you saw me when everyone else in that room looked right through me. That meant something and still does. Karen's eyes glistened. Then let's make sure your trust wasn't misplaced. In the privacy of Karen's office, away from the stairs and the phones and the weight of public judgment, Marcus finally allowed himself to breathe. Karen sat across from him, her computer screen glowing between them, and began the process of opening his accounts. I'd like to open a trust account, Marcus said, $25 million for my mother's retirement. Karen's hands froze over the keyboard. She looked up at him, her eyes wide. 25 million? She worked 3 jobs my entire life, sacrificed everything. She's never taking another night shift as long as she lives. Karen nodded, her hands actually shaking as she typed in the amount. And the other accounts? Scholarship funds for kids from my neighborhood, the ones who are brilliant but don't have access, who code on library computers because they can't afford laptops, who have the ideas but not the investors. Marcus's voice was steady, purposeful. I want to create pathways that didn't exist for me. Karen processed account after account, investment portfolios, trust funds, charitable foundations. With each entry, her hands trembled slightly, the weight of the numbers almost overwhelming. This is the largest account we've ever had, she finally said, sitting back in her chair. Marcus looked at her with the same calm he'd maintained through the entire ordeal. Money doesn't change who you are. It reveals it. They sat in silence for a moment, the profound truth of that statement settling over them. Then Karen asked the question that had been weighing on her since she'd recognized him. Why didn't you tell them who you were right away? When they were mocking you, when they were treating you like that, you could have ended it instantly. Marcus leaned back, his expression thoughtful. Because I shouldn't have to. My humanity shouldn't be conditional on my bank balance. I shouldn't have to prove I'm worthy of basic respect by flashing a bank statement. He paused, his voice growing quieter but more intense. Every black man in this country knows that feeling, of being judged before you open your mouth, of walking into a room and seeing people decide who you are based on your skin color, of being followed in stores, passed over for promotions, assumed to be dangerous or incompetent or less than. His eyes met hers. I'm tired of it, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt every single time. Karen nodded slowly. As an Asian woman in banking, I understand. Not the same struggles, not the same history, but I understand what it means to be underestimated, to have people assume you're not qualified for your own job. Today wasn't about revenge, Marcus said. It was about dignity, about standing firm in who I am, regardless of how others choose to see me. Those people learned a valuable lesson today, and I hope they take it with them. I hope it changes them. You're more gracious than I would have been, Karen admitted. Marcus shook his head. I'm just tired of being angry, tired of letting other people's prejudice dictate my emotions. I'd rather build something that matters. Speaking of building, Marcus continued, leaning forward, I want to tell you about something I'm planning. I'm opening a business incubator for minority entrepreneurs who've been rejected by traditional investors. People like me who have brilliant ideas but don't fit the profile venture capitalists are looking for. Karen's eyes lit up. That's incredible. Nobody should face 47 rejections before someone takes them seriously, Marcus said with conviction. Nobody should have to prove their worth 100 times over just to get a fraction of the opportunity that others get handed freely. He paused. I'd like you to sit on the advisory board, if you're interested. Karen didn't hesitate. I'd be honored. Good, Marcus said, a real smile breaking across his face for the first time that day. Because we're going to change things, one entrepreneur at a time. After the accounts were set up, after the paperwork was signed and processed, Marcus pulled out his phone. His hands, so steady through the entire confrontation, trembled slightly as he dialed his mother's number. She answered on the second ring. Baby, everything okay? Marcus's throat tightened. Mama, remember what you always told me? That my worth isn't determined by how others see me? Of course I remember. I meant every word. You were right, his voice cracked. And Mama, you never have to work again. Never have to take another overnight shift. Never have to choose between paying bills and buying groceries. I set up a trust, $25 million. It's yours. You're done. Silence on the other end. Then he heard it, his mother crying. Not sad tears, relief, why, decades of exhaustion finally releasing. Oh, baby, Diana whispered. I'm so proud of you. Because of the money? No, she said firmly, because of who you are, because you stood up for yourself today. Because you're using what you built to help others. Because you never forgot where you came from. That's what makes me proud. Marcus sat in that office, phone pressed to his ear, tears streaming down his face, and felt something shift inside him. Not the money, not the success, but the knowledge that he'd honored his mother's sacrifices, that he'd proven her faith in him wasn't misplaced. 6 months later, the transformation was complete. Prestige Financial had implemented a comprehensive diversity training program, not just a one-day seminar, but ongoing education about implicit bias, systemic racism, and how to serve all customers with equal dignity. Karen had made it mandatory for every employee, from tellers to executives. Marcus's business incubator, Cole Capital, had funded 23 startups. 15 of them were founded by minorities, 8 by women, 5 by immigrants. Every single one of them had been rejected by traditional venture capital firms. And now they were thriving, building companies, creating jobs, proving that talent and vision had nothing to do with what investors expected founders to look like. Ashley and Brad were working minimum wage jobs now, their banking careers effectively over. Word had spread about what happened, and no reputable financial institution would hire them. The lesson had been expensive. Peterson had sued the bank for wrongful termination, claiming he'd been made a scapegoat. He lost. The security footage, the witness statements, and his own documented history of discriminatory behavior sealed his fate. Deshaun, the security guard who'd recognized Marcus's struggle because he'd lived it himself, had been promoted to branch security manager. Marcus had personally recommended him to Karen, recognizing in Deshaun the kind of character that couldn't be taught. And Marcus and Karen remained partners, not just in business, but in a shared mission, to change the systems that had tried to keep them out, to open doors for others that had been closed to them, to prove that respect should never be conditional on wealth, race, or appearance. True respect, they'd learned, was earned through character and given freely because of humanity, Marcus could have embarrassed those bank employees further, could have made a spectacle of their humiliation, could have used his wealth as a weapon to destroy them completely. But he chose dignity instead. Because true power isn't about proving you're better than the people who wronged you. It's about lifting others up so they never have to experience what you did. Judgment based on appearance is still America's oldest sin, the belief that you can know someone's worth by looking at their clothes, their skin color, their neighborhood. It's a poison that runs deep, infecting systems and institutions in individual hearts. And it destroys lives. It steals opportunities. It tells brilliant people they don't belong simply because they don't fit someone's narrow idea of what success looks like. But people like Marcus are changing it. One interaction at a time, one startup funded, one door opened, one moment of standing firm in dignity when everything in you wants to walk away. They're proving that character matters more than appearance, that humanity transcends bank balances, that respect should be the default, not something you have to earn by proving your worth. Have you ever been judged by your appearance before people knew your story? Have you walked into a room and felt eyes deciding who you were before you even spoke? How did you respond? Did you walk away, or did you stand your ground? Share your experience in the comments below, because these stories matter. Your story matters. If this reminded you that character matters more than appearance, that dignity is more powerful than revenge, that one person standing firm can change an entire system, subscribe to True Soul Narratives. We tell stories about real people facing real prejudice and choosing to respond with grace, strength, and humanity. Hit that subscribe button and join our family. Until next time, remember your worth is not determined by how others see you, it's determined by who you choose to be when faced with their judgment. Stand firm, stay dignified, and never let anyone make you feel small. Because the Marcus Coles of the world are proving every single day that true power comes from character. And that's something no one can ever take away.